My mother-in-law invited me over to see her new house and closet, but what I didn't know was that her grandson would lock me inside, part of a cruel prank orchestrated by her. The tension between my husband's family and mine wasn't a secret, especially with Monica, my mother-in-law. Let me give you some context. Kyle, my husband, is one of 2 children in his family. Despite having an older sister, he's always been the golden boy. As for Monica, she's a full-blown narcissist. I'm talking about the type of person who demands gifts on her children's birthdays, claiming they wouldn't be here without her. Kyle once told me how, growing up, every single achievement he had was twisted into something about her. When we first started dating and I started spending more time at their house, Monica was as sweet as pie. But over time, as Kyle and I got more serious, her true nature began to show. And by the time we were planning our wedding 3 years ago, it escalated to a whole new level. She made everything an absolute nightmare. Luckily, Kyle and I had decided early on to pay for the wedding ourselves, hoping to avoid any interference from our families. But of course, Monica wasn't having any of it. When she tried to change the venue and layout, I politely told her no. She wasn't pleased. She complained to Kyle, who tried to talk to me, to compromise, but I told him our decision was final. I'd always wanted a casual, fun, non-religious wedding, nothing too fancy. The bridal party would have mismatched dresses from a loose color palette, a relaxed vibe. I'd asked Monica and the rest of the bridesmaids to pick out dresses from the palette, and just let me know so I could make sure it all coordinated. My mother and the bridesmaids sent me their options, and I didn't ask anyone to change a thing. But Monica? She never showed me any options, no matter how many times I asked. Then, on the day of the wedding, she showed up in an off-white dress, a medium-length dress with a transparent chiffon layer and a bolero. She looked triumphant. Smirking, she met my eyes, and I knew, right then and there, that this woman was going to be a thorn in my side forever. I couldn't hold back. I burst into tears. Kyle immediately told her to either change or leave. Father-in-law didn't want to drive her back, and the argument that followed was tense. But in the end, I let her stay in that dress. I couldn't even begin to describe how humiliating it was, watching guests react to her inappropriate choice of attire. I ignored her through the entire wedding, not a single word spoken to her. Kyle knew how upset I was and kept telling me that it didn't matter who wore white, because I was the bride. But to me, it wasn't just about the color. It was about respect, something his mother had clearly forgotten. Despite never once apologizing, I chose to forgive her. But her narcissism didn't stop there. When we were trying to get pregnant, it was a tough road. After my miscarriage, I was understandably nervous when I found out I was pregnant again. Kyle, on the other hand, was ecstatic. He supported me through every doctor's appointment, read parenting books with me, and even set up a nursery. 2 months later, we decided it was time to share the news with our family. We'd crossed the critical first trimester milestone, and we were certain everything was okay. So we invited our parents and close family for lunch, expecting a normal day. But when they saw my growing belly, everything changed. The looks on their faces, pure joy and amazement, were overwhelming. My mother started crying, her eyes glistening with tears of happiness. She understood why we'd kept the secret, and she was so excited to be a grandmother. Monica, on the other hand, didn't share in the happiness. Instead of celebrating, she grew angry. She was upset that we had kept the pregnancy a secret from her. She felt excluded, and to my shock, she blamed me for it. Despite my attempts to explain, she refused to listen. Her disapproval cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful moment. The rest of the evening, she avoided speaking to me entirely, and even refused to engage with my mother, who had always been kind to her. Monica buried herself in her phone, ignoring the conversations around her. The tension in the room was thick. It was clear that something was off. Monica started openly voicing her frustration, telling everyone she had no idea about my pregnancy and how she felt as if she had lost precious time with her future grandchild. Kyle and one of his brothers noticed her mood shift, and the tension reached a boiling point. I excused myself for a moment, needing a breather. My mother, noticing how distressed I was, came to comfort me, until I felt strong enough to go back. As the evening ended, Monica made a deliberate point of saying goodbye to me last. Throughout the day, she barely exchanged more than a quick hello and goodbye. When Kyle walked them to the car, I could hear the heated argument between them from where I stood in the foyer. Monica was using that moment to vent her frustrations about me, making sure her complaints reached every ear. By the time everyone had left, it was just me, my parents, Kyle, and his parents. Monica wasn't done. She looked directly at Kyle and yelled, "I can't believe you let her keep this pregnancy from me. I'm family! You should have told me immediately." Kyle tried to stay calm. He explained that we had wanted to be cautious, but Monica wasn't hearing it. "Cautious? I'm your mother. I should have been the first to know," she shot back. The argument grew louder, her voice filling the room. "You let her control everything. You should be putting your mother first." Kyle's face flushed red with embarrassment as he looked miserably at his mother. I was completely unaware of the tears running down my face, the hurt from her words still cutting through me. I tried to speak, but my mother gently stopped me. She whispered, "If you say anything now, she'll only find a way to turn this on you." It was true. Monica thrived on conflict, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of dragging me into another fight. So, I stayed quiet. She kept going, telling Kyle that he was letting me control everything, and that he should have made her the priority. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my father-in-law intervened and calmed Monica down. He drove her away, but this wouldn't be the last time. Her entitlement, her constant need to blow things out of proportion, this wasn't the end. There was a list of other things she'd done, small but infuriating things. One of the worst was when she tried to teach our baby to call her Ma instead of Grandma. That was the last straw for me, but I kept tolerating her. For Kyle. And that brings me to the recent events. Monica and father-in-law had moved into a new place, and they had been inviting us over to check it out, but life had been busy, so we hadn't had the chance. The sun hung high in the sky, its warmth barely noticeable as I stood outside my mother-in-law's grand new house. Kyle had asked me to visit, insisting that his mother's constant calls to him, asking him to check out her new place, needed to stop. I hesitated, but his plea finally convinced me. "Go alone with Debbie," he urged. "It'll make her stop bothering me." So I agreed, albeit reluctantly. That weekend, with Debbie busy at a friend's birthday party, I dropped her off and asked my mother to pick her up, knowing how much she enjoyed spending time with her grandparents. The house was massive, stretching across the property like something out of a magazine. It had that clean, polished look of money well spent. My father-in-law had clearly spared no expense. The blend of modern and classic styles was impressive, and the yard, dotted with green plants and colourful flowers, gave off a sweet fragrance that seemed to wash over everything. I rang the doorbell, and when my mother-in-law opened the door, her expression was a mix of excitement and surprise, until she realized it was just me. Her face shifted instantly, confusion painting her features. "Where's Kyle? Where's Debbie?" she asked, the words slipping out a little too sharp. "Kyle has an appointment," I said, "and Debbie's at a friend's party." The disappointment was palpable. "I can't believe you're all so busy. No one can find time to spend with me," she muttered, her voice laced with bitterness. I tried to change the subject, feeling the weight of the moment settle between us. "I'm here to check out your new house," I said, forcing a smile. Her frown softened just a little, and she invited me inside, her mood still hanging in the air like a storm cloud. The inside of the house was no less impressive. High ceilings, sleek finishes, everything tastefully arranged. My sister-in-law Haley and her 11-year-old son Jake were there too. I greeted them both, but as always, there was that tension with Haley. She never seemed to warm up to me, no matter how hard I tried. Whether it was personal or just her way of staying on her mother's good side, I couldn't tell. My mother-in-law explained that father-in-law was out with a friend, and she'd invited Haley and Jake over to spend some quality time with them. I nodded politely, trying to keep the peace, and asked Jake how school was going. But before the conversation could continue, my mother-in-law's attention snapped back to herself. "Oh, I bought so many new clothes," she said, her voice shifting. "I wanted you to come over and help me pick out some outfits." I blinked, caught off guard. She had never asked for my opinion on anything before. "Oh, that's nice. I'd be happy to help," I said, hiding my surprise. It felt strange, given our history, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be an opportunity to bond. She led me to what she proudly called her pride and joy, her newly designed walk-in closet. The closet was a sight to behold, shoes, clothes, accessories, all organized to perfection. It was impossible not to admire the effort she had put into curating her collection. As I looked through the clothes, she eagerly asked for my opinions on colors, styles, and accessories. For a moment, I let myself be swept up in the extravagance, giving thoughtful suggestions. Then, without warning, she told me to look around, saying she'd be right back. I nodded, browsing through the hangers, when suddenly I heard footsteps running behind me. Before I could react, there was a burst of mischievous laughter, and Jake gave me a hard push. I stumbled forward, crashing into the closet, and the door slammed shut behind me. The impact of my fall hit hard, my face pressed against the cold floor, teeth jarring from the shock. My mind raced. What just happened? The initial disorientation gave way to something far worse. Panic. My heart began to race as I realized the door was locked. Worse, the light switch, which had been outside the door, was switched off, plunging me into darkness. I froze, the space around me closing in. I could barely breathe. I banged on the door, calling out to my mother-in-law, to Haley, anyone who could hear me. But my cries were met with silence. My panic grew, and I scrambled for my phone. The flashlight flickered to life, but my heart sank as I saw my dwindling battery. Would I be stuck here in the dark until it died? I tried calling my husband Kyle, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. "Kyle, thank goodness you picked up. Something terrible has happened. I need your help." He was oddly calm. "What's going on?" "Your nephew just pushed me and locked me inside the closet," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He turned off the lights. I've been banging on the door, but no one's answering. You know how scared I am of the dark." His response was far from reassuring. "Are you seriously calling me in the middle of work for this? This isn't even an emergency. Just call my mom, she's in the house." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "I did call your mom." "And I called your sister. No one's picking up. My phone's dying and I'm terrified. Please come help me." Kyle's response was a cold dismissal. "Locked in a closet? Seriously? No, I can't come over. I'm busy right now. Find someone else." The words hit me like a slap. I felt sick, utterly helpless. My desperate attempts to reach out to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law continued to go unanswered. I could hear their laughter downstairs, and my isolation only deepened. I had one last option, my father-in-law. I dialed his number, my heart pounding in my chest. The phone rang, and I held my breath, praying he would pick up. He did. I explained everything as quickly as I could, detailing how Jake had locked me in and how no one was responding. "I'll be right there," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "I can't believe they didn't hear you." The wait felt like an eternity, the anxiety tightening its grip. Finally, I heard voices outside the closet. My father-in-law's voice echoed through the door, directing someone to unlock it. The door creaked open and I squinted against the sudden burst of light. There stood my father-in-law, concern on his face, along with Haley looking frustrated. I stumbled out of the closet, disoriented but grateful to be free. Why was she locked in there? My father-in-law demanded. My mother-in-law feigned innocence. I recounted the event, telling everyone exactly what had happened. But my mother-in-law and sister-in-law just scoffed. Jake would never do that, they insisted. I was furious. "Why didn't you come check on me?" I asked. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" They muttered excuses, something about being outside in the backyard. But I wasn't having it. I turned to Jake, demanding an explanation. But before I could get a word in, my sister-in-law interrupted. "Jake would never do something like that." She insisted, her voice rising. "You must have closed the door yourself, and the key probably fell out." Their version of the truth felt like a slap in the face, but I knew better than to argue with them. The situation was already chaotic enough. The blatant lies left me in a state of utter disbelief, my mind swirling with frustration. How could they do this to me? The darkness of that closet, the suffocating silence, it was still fresh in my mind, but none of it made sense. How did the lights turn off? Who was behind all of this? I couldn't understand. My father-in-law tried to soothe me, his voice calm, almost too calm. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. No matter what I said, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would back each other up. It was like a wall of denial I couldn't break through. Defeated, I left, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I called my mother on my way home, my hands trembling with shock. "I can't pick Debbie up tonight," I told her, barely able to speak. "She'll have to stay at their place." My mother could hear the tremor in my voice. She knew something was wrong, but I didn't have the energy to explain. Not then, not yet. I arrived home and waited for my husband to return, my mind racing with what I would say. I needed to confront him. I needed him to understand what his family had done to me. But when he walked through the door, the reality was worse than I could have imagined. As we sat down to dinner, I told him everything. I laid it out, every detail, every humiliation. But his reaction? It shattered me. He accused me of overreacting. "It's a ridiculous accusation," he said, his voice cutting through the air. "This is childish." His words felt like a slap. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could he not see the truth? How could he dismiss me so easily? He refused to believe that his nephew could have locked me in that closet. He refused to see the reality of what had happened. Instead, he made excuses for why he couldn't come to help. I'm not at your beck and call, he insisted. You need to be more understanding. The gaslighting was overwhelming, and for a moment I doubted myself. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Exhausted, I retreated to bed, the loneliness swallowing me whole. The emptiness in my chest felt suffocating. How could he dismiss my pain so easily? How could he not stand by me? I knew what had happened to me wasn't a prank. It wasn't some childish game. It was deliberate, calculated, humiliating. They all knew how terrified I was of the dark. And yet, they did this to me anyway. The following day, as I sat at home, still trying to process the emotional chaos, a message popped up on my phone. It was a TikTok link from my cousin. "Is this you?" she asked. I clicked the link, and my stomach dropped. There it was. The video. My nephew Jake had recorded everything. The entire ordeal, from the moment he locked me in that dark closet to the cruel laughter that followed. He'd posted it for his followers, proudly showing off his prank. My blood boiled as I watched. The way he laughed, like it was nothing, filled me with rage. I quickly shared the video in our family chat. This time I had proof that they couldn't deny. "Everyone owes me an apology," I typed, my hands shaking. I also messaged my sister-in-law, demanding that Jake delete the video immediately. But instead of acknowledging the severity of the situation, my mother-in-law brushed it off. "This is hilarious," she wrote back, her words cold and indifferent. "Boys will be boys." Sister-in-law joined in, laughing it off. "You shouldn't be bothered by this," she said. "It's just a harmless prank." The dismissive tone in her words made my blood run cold. I warned them, my voice trembling with anger. "If Jake doesn't take that video down, I'll take legal action." Mother-in-law's response? "You're being too much right now," she texted. "Chill out and learn to be part of the family." That was the last straw. I couldn't stand their lack of empathy any longer. I took matters into my own hands. I called the police, and when I showed them the video, they recognized how serious the situation was. They agreed to pay my sister-in-law a visit, questioning her about her son's TikTok account. Later, sister-in-law called me. Her voice was seething with anger. "How dare you file a complaint?" she yelled. "Seriously," I calmly told her. "Yes, I did. And I'm ready to take this to court." Her rage intensified, but I quickly reminded her that I was recording our conversation. "I'll gladly give it to my lawyer," I said. And just like that, she fell silent. It felt like a small victory. For once, I had control. But the battle was far from over. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next section.